Welcome back to IIA Bombay Annual Conference 2020-21. So for this last session, I have taken the role of MC from Burzin. For those who are, eyeing for the award, at the end of this last session, we will take the cutoff and point will be disabled. So please do try. I think we still have 45 minutes to go. At that time, we will see the scores to decide on the winner. So I have taken this role from Burzin because he has actually decided to switch the role and he is moderator for the next session. So let me formally introduce him. Burzin is currently serves as partner in risk advisory practice of Deloitte India, a risk management expert in over 2 decades of experience. His core expertise lies in delivering high impact internal audit, assisting companies with business process and control transformation, risk analytics, and enterprise risk management. His experience spans managing global engagement across sectors, including technology, telecom, consumer, hospitality, and donor organizations. His current focus is on developing Deloitte's Internal Audit 3.0 offering for the India geography and enabling risk analytics to solve business challenges for CFO, controllership, and internal audit teams. Prior to joining Deloitte, he served as executive director and senior partner in boutique risk consulting firm, where he was part of the leadership team. Burzin is a qualified chartered accountant. He is also a Fulbright fellow, having completed the Fulbright Nehru CII Fellowship Program at Tepper School of Business, Carnegie Mellon University. Burzin is a frequent speaker in National Forum on the topics of internal audit, risk, governance, and compliance. He was the past president of the Board of Governors of IIA Bombay Chapter and is currently on the Central Council of IIA India. With now, I invite Burzin to take over the session. Thank you.
Thank you, Akhilesh, and good evening, everybody, and good evening to my panel members. I was doing some research for this panel, and in the year 2020, according to some analysis done, the Indian private equity and the venture capital ecosystem had investments of almost between 45 to 50 billion dollars that came into India. If you go back a couple of years, 2019 and 2018, those numbers aren't very different. The mix might change year on year, but India has become and continues to be a very attractive sort of market for a private equity and VC funding to happen. There also was a study done by the CFA Institute on what was the value that PE and VCs brought to their companies. And what they did was that they picked up a 5-year data and they essentially looked at PE and VC companies that went IPO. The logic being is that there was enough publicly available data for those sort of companies. And they found that for all these companies, for the duration that the PE or the VC had invested in them, they had managed to get a 38% IRR for the duration annually, for their, during the investment period. They tried to break that down as to, what was the underlying reason for that IRR. And they saw that almost 30% of that IRR came because that company had grown top line and grown profitably. And therefore, that tends to lead to a conclusion that private equity players indeed do add significant value to companies in helping them to achieve their growth ambitions. So therefore, what we thought we would do in this panel, where I've invited 3 of my friends who sort of specialize in this space, is to try and understand as to how do they view their investee companies from a risk lens. To say that obviously if they are helping in the growth part of it, risk and reward are just 2 sides of that. So what is their view on risk? How do they contribute in balancing out the risk versus growth agenda at the investee companies that they oversee, and how do they bring a outside-in perspective of risk to the internal audit teams at those investee companies. So I've got three of my colleagues. Let me quickly introduce them. First up, with those lovely trees as his background, is Sandeep Kher. Sandeep is the director and the head portfolio finance at Sequoia Capital, and where he essentially leads the operations group for Sequoia in India and Southeast Asia, and leads the portfolio finance function, where essentially he works with the investee companies in helping them to integrate the worlds of business and finance for sustainable value creation. So welcome, Sandeep, and thank you for making time. Joining Sandeep is actually my old, ex-colleague from Anderson, which is Manu Sahni. Manu, today is with CX Capital. He's a managing director out there, and essentially he works on the financial services, healthcare, and consumer product sector. He's the investment officer on the board of many of the investments that CX Partners has done. He has an MBA from ISB, Hyderabad. Obviously, is a qualified chartered accountant as well. And prior to CX, has worked in CVC and obviously with Arthur Anderson, where he and I spent some time together. So Manu. And last but not the least, I'm extremely pleased that Imran could find time to join us this evening. Imran is a managing partner at Gaja Capital, in which is one of India's leading mid-market focused private equity firms that has been investing in several domestic champions in the Indian economy. Imran has over 20 years of experience in private equity and focuses on the pharmaceuticals and technology services. Prior to taking on a role within private equity, Imran worked in a variety of roles at Dr. Reddy's and Wipro Technologies. Imran has a postgraduate degree in software engineering from BITS Pilani and an MBA from IIM Bangalore. So welcome, Imran, and thank you for making time.
Pleasure.
So, gentlemen, why don't I start by just inviting some very brief opening comments from each of you all on this topic of how do you see risk management from a PE perspective? And if it's okay, Sandeep, I'll start with you.
Sure. Thank you. And thank you, Burzin, for getting us all together. On a topic, which at least I can safely say from the industry that I come from, or the sector that I come from, is, not really looked at from infancy stage. But having said that, two aspects that you touched upon, when you were introducing PVC firms, proud to say that at least on both those counts, which is getting money into India, we raised about $1.3 billion for India and Southeast Asia last year. We've had two of our companies, in the months of Jain and Feb go IPO. So yes, I think that's been a bit of a delight for us, especially in the mad times that all of us are in. And as a venture capital firm, we think that we've added value to our portfolio companies, and not just to the portfolio companies, but all the employees and the workforce and the families that are engaged and employed in those companies. Maybe I'll probably take 30 seconds to introduce myself. My name is Sandeep Kher, as Burzin mentioned. I'm a director and head of portfolio finance at Sequoia Capital. I'm glad to be here, and thank you all for investing your Saturday with us. I'm presuming all of you over here are optimistic risk takers because you believe this session is going to add value. So thank you so much for believing in that. Sequoia, as you know, is a venture capital firm, and essentially if you look at our motto is essentially to help daring founders build legendary companies. And essentially our role in that is supporting them from idea to IPO and beyond. And that's what we're proud ourselves with. And in that journey, and some of my perspective and what I'm going to share in the next 2 minutes is a perspective that I've developed over a period of time. I was on the other side of risk management. Essentially, I was a chief risk officer for a life insurance company, and then I plunged into venture investing with Sequoia. And I'll tell you that all the thoughts and the views that I'm going to share with you are essentially what I believe have rightly formed as views over the last 3-4 years that I've been at Sequoia. And essentially, those views are as following. I think the first and the foremost is that I think successful entrepreneurship, in my view, involves risk taking. If you don't embrace risk taking, you may want to rethink yourself as being a business owner. There are countless examples of entrepreneurs who've taken risk, and we have a huge perspective on where their businesses are today. It doesn't mean that you take risk blindly, but taking risk involves in an entrepreneurial journey careful planning and hard work. Nobody will be sure of the risk that you take and whether all of them will pay off, howsoever calculative you may be. But my personal view has been that this should not stop for us from taking risks, and not just risks as a professional, as a company, but I think as individuals as well. It's a very, very strong belief that I've developed over a period of time, that if you want to succeed, I think there is some form of risk is essential in whatever we do and wherever we are. My view is progress always involves risk. And my own example is something of that sort. As I mentioned to you, I was on the other side of risk management, and I plunged into VC investing. And also risk management also happened to me, it was not a design choice, to be honest. It was something that I've always, thrived in doing, and picking up new things and leading them and building them. Was quite good at it. And I can safely say that all the choices and all the embarkations that I've done, I have, come out moderately successful in those. And essentially those have come from this attribute that I have developed, have sharpened over the last so many years of doing something new and, figuring it out along the way. I know it's not probably the best way, and not many people, align with that thought process, but that's something that I believe, allows you to learn a lot and enrich yourself as an individual. And the same examples and the same ways, I think the businesses flourish, and especially in the category that we are present in, it is something of that attribute, which makes our founders very, very successful and the companies very successful. And we saw that come alive during COVID. Early March of last year, nobody was sure how this is going to impact us. People thought it's going to be a passing cloud, it's going to go away. Then suddenly dark clouds started appearing, and people started worrying. And I can tell you that, we have seen months, and I'm sure many of my co-speakers over here would have seen months of zero revenue in their portfolio companies. But the resilience of founders and their tenacity and their ability to take risks help them think out of the box. And, we have I think 97% of our portfolio companies today have done exceedingly well in the 12 months preceding to COVID. And that's an example of how, our portfolio companies, our founders have taken that adversity into and made that into an opportunity. It's not always that risks pay off, but always look at as failure as an opportunity to learn is something that, I have, and I teach this to my kids as well. It's not just I'm preaching this over here to all of you. It's something that I teach my 10-year-old as well, and encourage them to take risk and get into territories where they're not seen or not experienced before. And I probably end by sharing an example. I'm sure many of you would have heard of Starry Night. Starry Night is this painting by, Vincent van Gogh. I hope you all have heard of Vincent van Gogh. I don't know how many of you know Vincent van Gogh had 5 different careers before he went into painting. And every time when he plunged into a profession, he thought this was his calling. And he came out, of it because he was not in love, and he wanted to do something more and something more and something more. He floundered in his studies. When he was 33, he enrolled in an art school. And that was because, he was not afraid of taking and doing new things. And also because of the fact that he was not liking what he was doing. At least that's my view. He also enrolled, in that school at 33, and he could not last for more than, if I remember right, for more than few weeks. Today, if you look at, and you adjust that for inflation, his paintings could be sold for about $100 million. If this was Vincent van Gogh, who would have probably stuck to what he was doing and not taken the risks, we would have not seen Starry Night, and we would not seen other of his memorable work. I would end by saying, be careful not to be too careful, or you will unconsciously limit yourself and your explorations.
Thank you, Sandeep. Really very interesting set of analogies. Manu, your take?
Thanks, Burzin, and it's great to be reconnected after a long time. And let me take off from this brilliant point that you made, that growth of PE and VC funded companies that go for IPOs is at 30-35%. And when we invest and you're expecting that kind of growth, there's another side to it. If there are control weaknesses, if there are unexposed risks sitting in the company, they too will grow at 33-35% annual compounding. So it's absolutely critical what you couldn't do prior to investment, but you've identified during diligence. You completely set it right, because those weeds are going to grow bigger than the big trees that you've planted for growth, etc. And I can give numerous examples and I don't want to allude to a particular company, but let's say in the spectrum of portfolio companies where unkept risks have actually caused significant damage. I'll give an example where regulatory compliance was not looked after very well. There was this error by allotting shares to more than 50 people at one point of time under the old Companies Act. And that came and bit you 6 years later when you were filing a DRHP, because you needed to go and solve it. And the process with RBI or ROC or whatever took 2 years to do. You couldn't complete an IPO because of that simple slip long time back. We've done other successful IPOs as well. And I don't want to talk about the details because somebody might pick up where this error happened. But there are enough and more instances that the stupendous growth that we were chasing, it's like loading on more and more gadgets on an existing electrical network. So if you don't have your MCBs and your circuit breakers in place and your controls environments, you're going to trip. So the way I see risk management is you have to kind of imbibe it completely. Think of every risk manager as a friend. Identify the areas of concern in terms of the lack of controls in your investee company, especially when you're in a controlling position. Because what's happening is most of the time when we invest in a company, it's going to change orbits. So you've had the growth phase when the promoters are focusing on growth, success, better revenues, all of that good stuff. That's fine. But when we come in, we are limited period investors. We are not infinite period investors like promoters. So if there's something flounders or an error happens, we might not get a chance to recoup or recorrect it in the period we want to be in, which could be, let's say, as low as 3 years, as high as 7 to 8 years. That's typically the spectrum. Whereas founders can do damage control in a far more effective manner, what we can't do. So to completely focus on risk environment within the company, and it's just not the business risk. That, of course, one should kind of think about prior to investment whether you want to take or not. But there's so many associated risks. In India, compliance is it's got so many dimensions to it that, and I completely see internal audit as a friend. They sometimes end up being the only friend of the investor in a company, because they'll keep bringing to you things that are getting omitted or money is not getting spent adequately. And it's the reverse. It's us who's encouraging promoters to spend more on risk management, etc., rather than they coming to us. So one can't be too careful. I differ with Sandeep slightly on that. And of course, on the business side, if you don't take your adventures, you won't gain too much.
Excellent. Thank you, Manu. Imran, your opening comments.
Thanks, Burzin. We buy risk. We are in the risk-taking business. So in our business, our ability to take more risk depends on how sophisticated and institutionalized your risk management practices are. So, an easy way to describe what Gaja Capital does is that we buy revenue and sell EBITDA. And in this journey of squeezing out EBITDA from a company is this whole institutionalization process, which goes beyond innovation, risk-taking, and more of the same scaling. It involves transformation. So, Chris Hadfield, since we're sharing stories, is a NASA astronaut, and he runs a master class. I don't know if you guys have taken this online class. And one of the things he said is, that astronauts at NASA are trained to do two things. First of all, they're trained to acknowledge the mortality risk of being a rocket scientist or an astronaut. You know it can blow up. But on the other hand, they don't spend their time during the countdown praying. They know that when the countdown starts, it is at the back of years and maybe decades of research on identifying risks at every level of the mission and eliminating it or mitigating it. And that's what gives them the confidence to do mission after mission after mission. And I thought such a great analogy for venture capital and private equity. We started 15 years ago, Burzin, you know us very well. At that time, private equity and venture capital was less than $2 billion a year. This is 2004. And as you said, now it's 45 billion. We believe it will be 100 billion soon. And within 100 billion, the control share, a buyout share of 100 billion is going to be significantly larger than what you see now. And so the basis of competition for private equity has changed from buying well and selling well to owning well. And the owner's premium, which was in India ignored for a long time, is now coming to the fore. And during the COVID year, it's been tested even more. Since the global financial crisis in 2008, Gaja built an operating layer at the firm. Half of our professionals are senior operating professionals. We've got 3 full-time CFOs. We've got 1 full-time head of HR. And these folks work with these companies to ensure institutionalization. And we see tremendous value of this in preparing companies before they go public, in preparing them for an institutional sale to a larger buyout firm or a cross-border M&A. We see real value in being on top of it. And Burzin, from your own experience in working with us, it starts with a healthy respect for risk management. And we believe in across our portfolio companies, internal audit is even more important than statutory audit, which seems to get more attention. But if you get the internal audit right, and if you get the mindset right, then a lot of the statutory stuff gets taken care of.
Excellent. Thank you for that. So, Imran, you touched upon a very good point, saying that the role of private equity is not just to help companies with the finance piece, but with a lot more stuff, right? And again, not just strategy, but also at the operational level of helping them to, manage their operations, manage the risk in the operations. And I think you're doing that, through the intervention of senior, people who guide them and sort of, give them advice. Manu, from what do you think should be the mechanism that once you have invested into a company, on how do you ensure that risk management is on the agenda of your executive team at that investing company? I mean, what do you guys do?
Yeah, sure. So, even let me also narrate, follow everybody and narrate. And I don't think I can do any better than the great Uday Kotak. And he's talked about, when he speaks about risk management, he says it needs to be in 4 layers. It needs to be the operating layer of a deputy manager for sales, what sort of controls he's complying with. And whether it's finance, whether it's marketing, whether it's production of the factory, if it's a services company, how are you bidding? Are you following procedures? Are you not mis-selling? Are you not misreporting? Is the stock inventory being taken? Are purchases being recorded? That's at the operating level, and internal audit does that exceptionally well. Then there is a compliance level within the company, which does not have a reporting line to business. They have the ability to go to the board and tell the board that they are unhappy with the CFO or any CXO, whatever that may be. Or it doesn't have to be unhappiness, just identify an area of improvement. That's the second layer. So it not only monitors the control environment of the operating level, but it also has a separate view on the overall architecture, competitor effects in the economy, etc., in terms of what the risk is. The third layer is board. Now, are we comfortable in having truly quality independent actors? Because they will ask questions. They will force us to delay our excited growth plans at 35% IRR, sometimes down to 15% IRR, right? Are we okay to sacrifice that for a period of 6 months, 1 year? Are we ready for them to take independent evaluations of the board
as independent directors allowed to do or required to do now, and issue us back guidances or weaknesses in risk architecture. That's the third layer. And the fourth is the statutory audit, the regulator, whether it's the RBI or whomsoever it may be, RBI inspection. Let's say if you're talking about financial services, and that example is coming easy in my mind, and I'm sure there are many more. And the fourth layer. So how are we dealing with risk architecture at all four levels? And I might simply think that's the easiest way to say it is, oh, get your controls right. Then obviously compliance will have lesser to do. Let compliance right. Board will have lesser to do, and therefore, and get that right. Supervisory architecture of RBI, etc., will have lesser to do. I actually completely disagree. You can have internal controls right, but you could be doing absolutely the wrong business or the wrong sales strategy, etc. Or you could be misrunning the business at a different level with all the controls. So it's like no point having excellent controls doing absolutely the wrong thing. That it doesn't achieve too much. So you need to have, it's also at the executive level, have your business risk being thought out correctly, so for example, when COVID hit, what did the first thing I told all my investee companies? Draw down your working capital lines, take the money and book a fixed deposit in a different bank. Half of them struggled with saying, oh, there'll be an interest cost of 60 lakhs, 50 lakhs. I said, do you realize if your plants are shut down for 3 months and cash gets depleted and you don't have money to pay and lines are frozen? How will this 50, 60 lakh or 1 crore matter at that point of time? It took a day or two of conviction. The controls were perfect. The risk management was excellent. The compliance. The board was independent. They had great supervisory architecture. But did they have the entrepreneurship to handle the new risk? Now, why could we do it? Because we are once bitten, forever shy. So we had seen this happening in GFC, and we had seen what pains. Because then what happens? It is called upon private equity to put more money in. That's the only solution. And because we had seen what struggles and what beating up we were getting internally from our global ICs, we knew that let it not go there. Draw down the money, pay the additional extra crore, 2 crores, 3 crores of interest costs. And lo and behold, by June, they had repaid the money. The surpluses of cash were extra. Fixed deposits were back in place. Things didn't happen. But so what is really risk is also, it's actually as complex as identifying business risk for investing. So those are the layers by which I think of risk.
Fair point. Sandeep, you have a large portfolio of companies, right from early stage through to perhaps more mature, companies, right? And I'm guessing that even the type of entrepreneurs that you deal with are varying. Some could be young, some could be old, early stage, growth stage. Is there a different way in which you engage with them, or do you see that they think about risk in a different manner?
So, I mean, actually, Burzin, this has been a constant push and a struggle, so to say, because of the wide spectrum that we operate or we invest in. For the very early stage, nascent businesses, and our investments are in pre-revenue, pre-product companies, and I think over a period of time, we have been calibrating our model in terms of how to engage with the founders, how to engage with the finance teams, and how to make sure that the boards are giving the right amount of focus to all areas other than business, because business generally gets discussed, right? In every board meeting, any leadership meeting, you'll always invariably do discussions around board. But are you just doing discussions around something which are more in core and which could disrupt and derail businesses? I think we have over a period of time started injecting that in our investment leads and making sure that becomes an agenda. So to answer your question, and I don't think so there is one answer which could fit all our portfolio companies, but for the very early stage seed companies, I honestly don't think so there is any risk management to the extent of ensuring that there is cash and making sure that the companies are not drowning themselves by looking at vanity measures, and have a good view of the runway that they have. So I'm just trying to simplify it. So that's for our early stage companies. For our growth stage company, and I'll probably come to the other spectrum, I think we have now made strides in running them as any other grown mature business would run, by in fact seeding internal audits to begin with, and then internal audit committees to begin with. Over the last 2 years is the change that we've now brought around in all our growth companies to tell them that, hey, if your ultimate goal is IPO, or if your ultimate aim is a strategic outcome, you have to not just be selling a good revenue growth story, but you have to be selling a story around how well-run business you are from all aspects and not just from revenue. And those are the things that we started now placing, importance on, driving that. And we've now ensured that, in companies which are of a certain size, there has to be an audit committee, there has to be an internal auditor, and there is discussion around the table on these aspects. Now, obviously, at the level of board, it is not very detailed, and I'll be very candid about that. But what we do is we make sure that the board gets good inputs from this independently run audit committee, because we've now institutionalized a framework where you have independence. It's just not investors who are sitting over there, but you have independence. You get people who have done this and who know where all breakages could happen. And we've started imbibing that into our growth companies. And somewhere the middle of the pack, it's a little bit of a mix and match. You would give them some elbow room, but at the same point of time, we've devised certain checks and balances, look at the numbers quarterly, have them give, we've now asked for our founder and CFOs to sign off on a director's questionnaire to management, so to say, just to make sure that there is a process of asking them all the other things which generally don't get discussed in business reviews or board meetings.
Excellent. Imran, my question to you is that, again, and I think Manu made reference to COVID, right? And how perhaps some of his portfolio companies reacted. But clearly now what's coming across is that the fact that crises will happen is sort of a given now, right? And therefore, how companies will also react to a crisis will also determine their sort of success or lack thereof. If you take a bird's eye view across your portfolio companies to try and sort of see as to what did companies do well and perhaps not so well in this sort of crisis stage, think March through to say June or July of last year. Do you have any contrasting stories there?
Yes, I think we've been fortunate that we had we have a remarkably resilient portfolio, but there are some differences. For example, one of our biggest learnings during COVID was that you can recreate business, but you can't recreate cash. So companies that were decisive in their cost cuts, in their pay cuts, in their renegotiation of rentals and indirect fixed costs. So the ones that were decisive and fast then were better prepared for the reinflation and the bounce back than others who said, let's wait another quarter, let's wait 2 quarters, things are going to come back, this is temporary. And they had to institute those cost cuts, but then they didn't do it at a time of their choosing. They did it out of, they did it on the back foot. So I think that would be the biggest reason, the biggest lesson from COVID. The other lesson is equally interesting, and perhaps there's more diversity there, which is companies that spotted digital as a capability to build towards resilience. I think companies that spotted that ahead of time, invested in it, although it wasn't urgent, but important. I think they were able to just, zip through COVID, as opposed to the others who said, I've got a core business, digital is 5% of my business, so why bother about it now? I'll get to it later.
Okay, excellent.
Sorry, Burzin, if I may come in, I think to Imran's point on these two aspects, I think, when I mentioned that 97% of our portfolio has rebounded from COVID, and, all of them are sitting pretty, and our definition of pretty could be very different from, the businesses that Manu and Imran run and manage. But, and that's what we saw in people, the resilient ones, the ones who were thinking a step ahead, who were taking a little bolder bets, and not necessarily the conventional bets, were the ones that saw and came back to the same spot much sooner. And adoption of technology, and our investment thesis is largely technology, but there also you have varying forms and means of tech adoption or digital. I think those are the businesses which saw rebound and are still seeing huge amount of traction, and not just love from customers but love from all around. So I think very, very pertinent points. I mean, that's what COVID at least taught us.
To support what Imran said, in January of 2020, McKinsey had released a report that online retail adoption by American consumers since 2000, the year 2000 till 2020 beginning, had gone to 13.5 or 14%. And they believed to reach 20%, it'll go till 2028 or 2027. Guess what? In 135 days, it went to 30%. Of course, there will be some amount of retracement as people go out. In fact, people are compulsive. They want to go and touch and feel things and not do everything online. This work from home, I always believe, is always a good thing if it's voluntary. Beyond that, but so it'll be retracement. But the point is that so dramatic, and in fact, McKinsey then republished it, and I was attending one of the seminars shortly. They're actually happy how incorrect they were proven by the fact that what's happened to COVID.
Sure.
So
sure.
This goes to how if you had thought of alternative strategies to be future ready, how different you would be versus somebody who would have got completely hacked by COVID. And in our portfolio also, we see the diversity.
Got it. So Manu, again, sort of staying on that theme of again risk management in difficult times. While each of your portfolio companies will have their own risk management sort of processes, frameworks, strategies, inter-audit teams or not, whatever, right? As a strategic investor or as a private equity investor, what role do you play in working with the company to either enhance that or bring that into more focus or give that more teeth? I mean, do you guys have a direct role or it is more indirect?
Traditionally, till we were only doing minority, it used to be more indirect, and it used to be through an agency of a well-reputed Big Four handling the risk process. If there was an emergency, for example, there was one company more than a decade ago that had taken a bad derivative contract, and we realized there was just complete lack of capability within the company to even understand what they had signed up to. Then it required us to pull in resources internally from the larger corporate system of ours to pull in and help and solve a specific problem because it was so deep and acute, it could not be done by journalists, etc. But I think over time, we've realized that success is predicated on risk management correctly, right? It has to be at every level and it has to be more ingrained. What I try to do is that whenever we are looking at a risk assessment in any company, whether it's control environment, whether it's new business venture, whether it's financial, whether it's your balance sheet, etc. The learning I've had, and I read it in, I think, Bill Clinton's book, he says whenever there was a crisis or a challenge, get people from different fields to examine the same problem in a room. And once you have this multi-dimensional thought process, you come to much better results far more quickly. And he speaks about it in one of his presidential learning centers that he does with Bush 33. He describes how this happens and how different aspects of a problem get examined. And very quickly, or even it actually reduces time on a crisis management, which I'm kind of transposing to risk management. You shaft out what's not necessary and you come to a solution oriented. So one of the things I do is I try and get different opinions in. It's not just, if it's a production problem, it should not only be the production guys solving in terms of a risk. I need to understand from sales and marketing that can you meet your targets with this kind of a solution? And just get more opinions. It helps us in terms of what level of involvement we need to do. But are we direct risk managers? No, I don't think. At least I'm not there yet. We require aid and help, and I think that's the way I think it will be for some point of time. Directly risk management is just, it requires a different level of engagement, which I think if you have multiple investments with limited period of time and switching from one act to the other, it requires aid of specialists like yourselves in solving for risk management.
Sure, thanks. Imran, you made a statement at the beginning saying that you buy risk, right, in a sense, and then you said we buy revenue and sell EBITDA. So when you're evaluating potential investment companies, right, what role does risk management play in that decision-making point? Because if you're looking at a risky entrepreneur, how do you sort of balance that out? Just, give us some sense on that sort of, thought then.
That's an excellent question. It's a slightly longer answer because, the obvious answer is that, first of all, when you buy risk, you need to understand the risk you're buying. Because if you understand the risk you're buying, then you can take more risk than the other guy, and that has an advantage in deal origination, right? Because you understand the risk better than others. But how do we do it? We spend a lot of time at Gaja in research and coverage. So before we get to a deal situation, which has its own sword hanging on timelines, we spend between a year, 2-3 years often on understanding intimately how a company is doing in the marketplace, especially in sectors that we specialize in. We have referenceability of the key men or the key protagonists in these companies. And often we rely on what they said they will do in the past and what they've done as an important proxy of what your diligence findings are going to show up, right? So essentially what we're trying to do at that stage is to model behavior, to see if the key protagonist has a healthy respect for risk management, or does he see the CFO's office as something that should be in the basement, filing returns, and his job is really to generate revenue. And we find a huge correlation between this mindset of the key protagonist respecting finance, respecting accounts, respecting internal audit, respecting risk management, genuinely respecting it, willing to spend and staff it appropriately, and also their behavior of saying they'll do something and actually following through beyond just the revenue and the profitability numbers.
And just to Burzin add on that, in fact, what we do for our growth stage investments is, obviously you speak a lot and interact a lot with the founders, but we also try making sure that, we speak with people who are surrounding the founder or the CEO, most importantly, because are there contradictory voices around the table, or everybody's, talking the same language? Because then you have a problem. And then that, this business can only go one way. And it's a very binary bet that you're taking. But if you have different voices, then that there will be some sense around the table that'll get thrown and discussed. And essentially, during our diligence, we do try making sure that you get some coverage around that as well.
Yeah, because I was just thinking that unlike what Imran mentioned, that perhaps he has a liberty of 1 year to 3 years to evaluate a business before they make an investment. You're doing VC stuff, right? Which is even more, you don't have that liberty because you're effectively taking a bet on an individual and an idea. So, your risk management at that stage is it intuitive, or is there more science to it?
At an early stage, I can be very, very candid that it does not exist. When you're doing a seed investment, you're taking a bet on whether this will germinate or not, right? It's as simple as that. Now, and the way to think about in our business is that once the revenue stream starts picking up, is that when we say, okay, now you need to, inject into finance team capabilities. Now you need to have some good hands around the deck in terms of auditors, and how should you work on an internal auditor, and so on and so forth. So at an early stage, no. Honestly, the focus is to make sure we have obviously some parameters to make sure that the business or the founders are humming. You will have it on product fitment, you will have on team capabilities built out, and so on and so forth. And one vector which as finance I will drive is cash. Are you, on top of your cash numbers or not? Is your working capital cycle humming, or are you looking at only GMV and not looking at what's flowing into your bank account? That is one vector that we drive religiously across our early stage investments, just to make sure that we're not beating our own drums and looking over our shoulders.
Right. So I think that the one thing that each of you all have said in different ways, but I think agree on, I think is cash is king. Right? Manu mentioned cash in the sense of COVID. You mentioned cash right now. Imran mentioned the decisiveness again during the COVID phase on the cash piece, right? So I think So I think that's one of the key takeaways that at least I have on this is cash management at any stage of a company, I think is extremely critical. And from a risk management perspective is one that we as internal auditors need to really focus on. So I think we're almost at the top of the hour. So unfortunately, I need to close this this panel discussion. But before I do that, Manu, Imran, Sandeep, thank you, very much for spending your Saturday afternoon / evening, with us. I can tell you that in the many years that I've been associated with the IIA, this is the first time perhaps that we've had three individuals with your background, come and share a very unique perspective on risk management with all of my colleagues and participants. So, thank you very much.
It was a pleasure, Burzin. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks, Burzin. Pleasure.
Akhilesh, over to you.
Thanks, Burzin. I think it was a great lesson, and knowing risk, how do P and VC looks at the risk management and internal audit, I think it will help all of our members. So thanks a lot for this very new session, which we introduced for the first time, but the way private equity and venture capital investment is growing. I think this is something which we can look forward for our next year's programs, and we can also look at more such programs, not only in the annual conference. So thanks to all the panelists for this great session.
Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you. Moving forward, I think so this is time to announce our winners from the leaderboard. So we have at top Nana Makhiza, who actually gets Samsung tablet. So congratulations, Nana. On second place, we have Tarun Choitaramani, who gets Jabra earphone. At third place, we have Neha Pansari, but she was already a winner yesterday. So Neha, thanks for the participation. I understand. Yeah, the whole idea was actually to participate, interact with each other. So thank you for that. So technically, the third place will go to Leo Mampili. So he gets a Jabra earphone. And at fourth place, we have Amol Kumar Atravalkar. He again gets Jabra earphone. So thanks all the winners for this. Our office will connect with you for delivery of these awards. Coming back on this session, I think we had a great 2 days. We had a very enriching day yesterday, and from today morning we had 4 sessions which were all very interesting. So we started with Jainita John, and she explained a lot of stuff which is very important for internal auditors. The next session was on ESG, which is something which we hear a lot, and we get questions in boardroom, and as an auditors, we need to be ready to face those questions. Then the next session was on that data privacy, something which is going to hit all of us going forward, and it is not in near future, probably pretty near, in a month or so, we may see the act coming in place. The last is then we had our award, annual award, which we announced, and there was record participation, and it was again won by 4 very deserving corporates. The last session we just concluded was on private equity, first time in our session, but it was a very enriching experience. Just few announcements for the benefit of all those who have participated and are not members of IIA Bombay Chapter or IIA India. IIA Bombay Chapter has decided to waive entrance fees for people who are not members if they enroll before 31st of March 2021 for 21-22 membership. Our office will send communication to all the participants of this conference in that regard. again, so this is we have come to end of our annual program, but we keep on conducting a lot of programs throughout the year. In fact, every week we have some or the other program which keeps happening on virtual platform, webinars or conferences. Our next program is on 24th March, which is on 3 lines model, which has been released by the IIA, which is being conducted by KV Mukundan. So do join for that. On 2nd April, we have session on analytics and AI. So all these, the idea is actually to share knowledge among the entire community, and we have all the speakers who actually come forward for these. So if you want to volunteer for it, do come across. We will be happy to look at it. We are happy to see more and more volunteers joining us. At the end, I would like to thank all our sponsors, our gold partners, Legacies, Mahajan Ibra and Protivity, our silver partners, Sama and Ariatech, and our technology partner, eTrends. I would also like to thank IIA India BOG members, IIA Bombay BOG members, our event partner, Tradition and Trend, IIA India staff, Mehnaz and Kritika, and a very special thank to Burzin to conduct the, have 2 days as an MC, which helped us a lot. He is probably more professional as an MC, which we can see. So thanks, Burzin, for that, and all IIA India panelists. So thank you. See you again over the next programs. Thanks a lot.